All right, so we are in Unit 4. This is the part 1 of the notes where we're going to cover the issue of demand. And we're kind of flowing straight in from Unit 2 where we talked about scarcity and the idea that we try to meet our needs and wants and deal with the issue of scarcity through purchasing of goods and services. And so we're going to deal with demand here. And this looks at things through a consumer's perspective, or if you think about the circular flow chart that we had, it looks at things through the perspective of the household, who are going to participate in the product market to obtain goods and services by trading money for those goods and services, and in doing so, they will be satisfying their needs and wants. So we call demand the desire to own something and the ability to pay for it. The way we measure it is that you have to have both parts of this. You have to desire it, you have to be willing to buy it, but you also have to have the ability to pay for it. You have to be willing and able. Otherwise, it's just you like something but you can't buy it, or you have the money for something but you really don't want anything that you want to spend your money on. So when you put both of those parts together, you have demand. So there's a law of demand that states that as the price of a good or a service goes down or decreases, the quantity being demanded for that good will increase. And that makes sense. When things go on sale, people buy more of it. And the inverse is true as well. When price increases, the quantity being demanded for a certain good or service decreases. Less people want it, the more expensive it is. And so we can measure that. And when the law of demand is in place, there's really two effects that are happening that are a part of this idea of demand. And that's the income effect and the substitution effect. The income effect is when someone's income has changed, or it feels like it's changed because prices have all risen across the board, like during a time of inflation. This will have an effect on the quantity that consumers demand or are willing and able to purchase. And so, for instance, if the price of apples increases, you'll see less consumption of apples due to the income effect. But also because prices are going up or you just have less money, you're not going to buy as much of other types of goods either. Now, when there are substitute goods available to buy, you might see a change in one item, but the effect of what the consumer does with the others might be different. So for instance, in the same scenario, if the price of apples increases, where it says substitution effect, you're going to see people buy less apples. But you might see them substitute out, instead of buying that as a fruit, they may find other fruit like oranges that are cheaper, perhaps. And you'll see an increase in consumption of those other goods. And then the same thing when the price of an apple decreases, you'll see more consumption of apples, but also of other goods because now you can afford the other goods even though you're buying apples because of how much money you're saving, perhaps. So you can study this chart and see that these two effects feed into this idea of demand. Now, since we can measure demand, since people are willing and able to purchase goods, we can actually measure what they purchase and at what price. And so a schedule is just another way of saying a table that shows this relationship of price and the quantity that's being demanded. On the left side, you can see an individual demand schedule. In this case, it's the price of pizza. And so there might be one place that charges $1 a slice, one place that charges $2 a slice, etc., up to $6 a slice. And this would be what a single individual would demand, what they're willing and able to buy at each price. And so we see that because that is what they bought. Now, if I want to look at more than just an individual, but look at the entire market and what's being demanded in a market, then on the right side you see a market demand schedule. And so the same price as a pizza, but you'll see the quantity demanded is a lot higher when you consider more than one buyer. So you have 300 for $1 a slice, all the way up to 50 slices being demanded at $6 a slice. Now, once you know this table, you can then graph the price on one axis and the quantity being demanded on another axis, and that is what we call a demand curve or a demand graph. And you can see that the prices are the same. On the left side is the individual, Ashley, and then on the right side for the entire market. And those numbers where the plot points are correspond directly to what you saw on the previous slide. Now you'll notice that the demand curve is sloping down and to the right. That is because of the negative relationship in the law of demand between price and quantity demanded. So it has a negative slope. Okay, so as price increases, the quantity demanded does the opposite. It decreases. And then, you're going to see that when price increases, quantity demand decreases. And so when that happens, you would move along the existing curve, and these quantities would be accurate. So for instance, if pizza was being sold at $5 a slice, the quantity being demanded is 100 slices. If the price of pizza decreases to $2 a slice, you can see that on the curve itself, we would go from here, we're at $5, and we would actually increase to here at $2, and so we go from 100 slices to 250 slices of our quantity being demanded for pizza as a market. Notice that because of the inverse relationship of price and quantity demanded, even though it looked like I was moving in a down direction on the demand curve, we were actually increasing the quantity being demanded. Okay, so always judge increase and decrease by the quantity being demanded of a good or a service, not by the direction you might be appearing to move on the actual curve. Now, when price is the only thing changing, we use a Latin term called ceteris paribus to refer to this, meaning all things held constant, meaning this graph is accurate as long as price is the only thing that changes to affect the quantity that's being demanded. If something besides price is introduced, then we would have to actually move this line to make it more accurate. In other words, every price might still be the same in the marketplace, but the quantity demanded at each price would either all be increasing for every single price, or the quantity demanded would be decreasing for every single price. And that would look like this. So when there's an increase in the quantity being demanded at every price, we would actually shift from the original demand curve to the right. That's an increase. Okay, so the price of pizza might still be 6, and that was the original quantity demanded where it hits the line here, but you might actually see an increase all the way out to here and for every single price. And a decrease would shift back towards the left. Now what causes these is what we call non-price determinants. And for demand, there are 6 of them that we need to know. A change in income, a change in consumers' expectations, that's when you expect something in the future to happen, but it has an effect on your current demand, so we always graph what happens now. Change in demographics, if more female shoppers, for instance, were out there, you might see an increase in demand for things that segment of society might want. Or if there was a decrease in that particular demographic. It could be gender, it could be ethnicity, it could be levels of education. I mean, there's many things that can go into demographics. And then population size, how many people live in a certain area, can affect the quantity being demanded of a product or a service. Consumer tastes, fads, what's popular, advertising, something that influences us to buy. And then the price of a related good can relate to either what we call complementary goods, things you buy and use together. So if you save money on peanut butter, you might go out and purchase more jelly because they go together for some people. Chips and dip. Or it could relate to what we call a substitute good, that substitution effect that we talked about. So if the price of steak increases and people that buy steak can't afford it, they might substitute out another meat in its place, like chicken or something like that. So we're going to look at these things, and it's going to have a direct influence on picking up that line and moving it at every price level, because the quantity demanded isn't reflected in the existing curve. We have to now draw a new curve, either to the right for an increase or to the left for a decrease. And we'll talk more about that when we actually work some graphing problems.